The night air pressed cold against Maria's skin as she navigated the dimly lit streets, the city's harsh lights casting long shadows that seemed to swallow her whole. Her hands instinctively cradled the curve of her belly, a tender shield against the biting wind that cut through the threadbare layers she wore. Each breath she took came with a sharp sting, the chills seeping deep into her bones. But still she pressed on, her footsteps echoing softly against the cracked pavement. The city felt vast and unyielding tonight, an indifferent maze of concrete and steel where she was invisible, just another face lost in the crowd. Her heart ached, a heavy, twisting ache, not just from hunger or cold, but from the raw sting of abandonment. Her partner had vanished weeks ago, leaving no word, no promise. The fragile ties to her family had long since frayed and snapped, leaving her utterly alone. Her mind raced with memories of better days, now blurred by the relentless struggle of survival. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see someone, anyone, following her, a shadow looming with intentions unknown. But the streets were empty, save for the occasional flicker of a neon sign buzzing in the distance. The city's hum was a low, constant drone, broken only by the distant wail of sirens or the clatter of a lone car speeding by. Maria's stomach tightened with hunger, a gnawing emptiness that mirrored the growing fear inside her. Being pregnant and homeless in this unforgiving city was a precarious existence, a delicate balance between hope and despair. Each night brought new dangers: harsh winds, cold pavements, strangers with unpredictable faces. Yet beneath the weight of her worries, a small ember of determination glowed, stubborn and fierce. As she turned a corner, the silhouette of an old, abandoned schoolhouse came into view, its once bright windows now dull and lifeless. The building stood like a forgotten giant, its paint peeling and walls scarred by years of neglect. Yet tonight, it offered something she desperately needed: shelter. Maria hesitated for a moment, her breath fogging in the cold air, before stepping toward the looming structure. The door was heavy and worn, its hinges protesting with a low creak as she pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale but shielded from the biting cold outside. Shadows pooled in the corners, and dust motes danced in the faint glow of moonlight filtering through broken panes. Maria's footsteps stirred the silence, and the faint scent of aged wood and forgotten memories filled her senses. She moved carefully, her eyes adjusting to the dimness, seeking a corner that could offer refuge. The floor was littered with debris: crumpled papers, shattered glass, bits of fallen plaster, but beneath the decay, the schoolhouse whispered stories of days long past. The faint outline of a chalkboard still clung to one wall, its surface scarred and faded, a silent testament to lessons once taught and learned. Maria's fingers brushed over a broken desk, its surface scratched and worn smooth by countless hands before hers. She imagined children's laughter echoing through these halls, teachers' gentle voices guiding eager minds. For a fleeting moment, the harshness of her reality softened, replaced by a bittersweet longing for stability and community. Her breath came shallow as she found a nook beneath a shattered window, where a tangle of old blankets lay forgotten. She gathered them close, their threadbare fabric an imperfect but welcome shield against the cold. Nestling into the small space, Maria allowed herself a brief respite, the quiet stillness a fragile comfort amidst the chaos of her life. Her eyes wandered across the room, catching glimpses of faded posters peeling from the walls, remnants of lessons and school events, frozen in time. The ghosts of the past seemed to linger here, watching over the empty rooms with a quiet, solemn presence. Maria felt a strange connection to this place, a sense that, despite its abandonment, the schoolhouse still held a heartbeat, a faint pulse of hope. Outside, the wind howled softly, rattling the broken window panes and sending a chill through the room. Maria wrapped the blankets tighter, pressing her hands against her belly, feeling the small, steady flutter of life within. The child she carried was a beacon in the darkness, a reason to endure, a future yet unwritten. Her thoughts drifted to the coming days and nights, filled with uncertainty and fear. Where would she find food? How would she protect herself and her unborn child from the dangers lurking beyond these fragile walls? The weight of responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders. Yet beneath it all, a quiet resolve began to take root. Maria closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to imagine a different path. A life where safety and warmth were not mere wishes, but realities. The schoolhouse, with its peeling paint and shattered windows, became more than just a shelter. It was a symbol of survival, a place where hope might still take root. As the night deepened, Maria's heartbeat slowed, syncing with the gentle rhythm of the city's distant pulse. The schoolhouse, forgotten by many, had become her sanctuary, a fragile refuge against the cold and loneliness. And though the path ahead remained uncertain, within these crumbling walls, she found a flicker of light, a promise that she and her child could endure, no matter what the city might throw their way. Outside, the first hints of dawn began to brush the horizon, pale and tentative. Maria remained nestled in her corner, eyes open now, alert to every sound, ready to face whatever the new day might bring. The city was vast, and the night was long, but for this moment, she was safe. The schoolhouse had opened its doors to her, and in return, she would fight to keep its fragile warmth alive. The weak light of dawn filtered through the cracked window panes, casting pale fingers across the dust-choked room where Maria sat wrapped in the thin blankets she had found. The chill persisted, gnawing at her skin despite the feeble protection. But inside her chest, a different kind of cold settled. A mix of fear, exhaustion, and a fragile hope that flickered like a candle struggling against a draft. Her fingers traced gentle circles over the swell of her belly, feeling the subtle, reassuring flutter of the life growing within her. That small, persistent movement was both a comfort and a reminder of the precariousness of her situation. The city outside was vast and indifferent, its sprawling streets a labyrinth where she was just another shadow, another story swallowed by the relentless grind of survival. Maria's mind drifted back to the moments that had led her here, to this abandoned sanctuary. The last few weeks had been a blur of uncertainty and hardship, a journey marked by cold nights, empty stomachs, and the gnawing loneliness that came from being severed from everyone she once trusted. Her partner's sudden disappearance had left a raw wound, and the silence that followed was more deafening than any cries. She thought of her family, distant and unreachable, their voices fading into echoes of a life she once knew. Attempts to reach out had been met with closed doors and colder words. The stigma of her situation weighed heavily, and with each rejection, the walls of isolation closed tighter around her. Being pregnant in this unforgiving city was like walking a razor's edge. Every day was a battle against the elements and the dangers lurking in the shadows, strangers with unpredictable intentions, the threat of illness, and the constant fear that she might not find a safe place to rest. Her body was weary, her steps slower, but inside, a stubborn flame of determination burned bright. She remembered the nights spent shivering beneath scant layers on cold benches or alleyways, the ache of hunger gnawing at her insides, and the crushing weight of despair that threatened to pull her under. Yet, even in those darkest moments, she clung to the hope that somewhere beyond the bleakness, a new beginning waited. The schoolhouse, with its cracked walls and empty halls, was a fragile promise of shelter. It was not much, drafty, cold, and filled with the ghosts of forgotten lessons. But it was a refuge from the biting wind and the unforgiving streets. Inside, the silence was thick, but less threatening than the chaos outside. Maria's gaze settled on the faded chalkboard still mounted on the wall, its surface scarred and streaked with time. She imagined the voices that once filled this room. The laughter of children, the patient guidance of teachers, the hopeful anticipation of young minds eager to learn. That memory was a balm to her frayed nerves, a reminder that this place had once been filled with warmth and purpose. Her thoughts wandered to the dangers she faced as a vulnerable, expectant mother on the streets. The city's nights were no friend to those without shelter, especially not to someone carrying a child. Each shadow became a threat, every unfamiliar face a potential danger. The fear was a constant companion, threading through her days and nights with relentless persistence. Yet, beneath that fear, there was a growing resolve. The baby inside her was a beacon, a reason to endure and fight against the odds. She knew that her survival was tied not only to her own strength, but to the promise of life she carried. It was a responsibility that both terrified and empowered her. Maria's body bore the marks of her struggle, calloused hands, tired eyes rimmed with dark shadows, and a weariness that settled deep into her bones. But her spirit remained unbroken. She vowed silently to protect her unborn child, to find a way through the darkness that surrounded them. As she huddled in the corner of the schoolhouse, the cold seeped through the thin blanket, reminding her of the urgent need for warmth and safety. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath, to quiet the storm of worries swirling inside her mind. The city outside was a harsh place, but within this fragile shelter, she found a measure of peace. Her thoughts turned to what lay ahead, the uncertain days, the challenges she would face alone. Food was scarce, and every step outside carried the risk of exposure and harm. Yet, the schoolhouse was a starting point, a place where she could gather strength and plan her next moves. Maria's fingers brushed over the cracked floorboards beneath her, grounding her in the present. The building had once been a place of learning and growth, and perhaps, in its own quiet way, it offered her a chance to begin again. The stories embedded in its walls whispered of resilience and hope, urging her to hold on. She opened her eyes and looked toward the small pile of blankets she had gathered, the meager collection of warmth and comfort she could call her own. It was not much, but it was enough for now. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, to feel the steady beat of her heart and the gentle movements within her belly. The city's distant hum seeped through the broken windows, cars passing, voices muffled by distance, the occasional bark of a dog. Outside, life continued unabated, indifferent to the struggles of a lone woman seeking shelter in a forgotten schoolhouse. But inside, Maria nurtured a fragile hope that tomorrow might be different. Her thoughts flickered to the future, to the child she would soon bring into this world. The uncertainty was daunting, but the bond between mother and child was a source of strength that no hardship could sever. In this quiet moment, Maria made a silent promise to fight, to protect, and to find a way to carve out a safe space in the midst of chaos. The cold night was giving way to the first light of morning, soft and tentative, a reminder that even the darkest times could give way to new beginnings. Maria remained seated in her corner, wrapped in blankets, her gaze steady and determined. She did not know what the coming days would hold, but she knew she could not face them alone. The schoolhouse was a fragile refuge, but it was also a beacon, a place where she could gather strength, find courage, and hold on to the hope that, Despite everything, survival was possible. As the sun's pale light grew stronger, casting long shadows across the floor, Maria pressed her hands once more to her belly, feeling the quiet rhythm of life within. In that moment, despite the cold and the uncertainty, she found a flicker of peace, a promise that she and her child would endure, no matter what the city might bring. The first light of morning spilled through the fractured glass panes, casting fractured beams of pale gold across the dusty floorboards. Maria rose slowly, the stiffness in her joints a dull reminder of the cold night spent curled beneath the tattered blankets. Each movement was deliberate, careful, her body aching in places she barely noticed before, a tender reminder of the life growing within her. The schoolhouse, still cloaked in silence, welcomed the dawn with a quiet stillness that felt both eerie and strangely comforting. She stepped cautiously across the scattered debris, her worn boots stirring up faint clouds of dust that hung in the shafts of light. The air was heavy with the scent of aged wood and neglect. But beneath it all, there was a faint trace of something else. A lingering memory of purpose and warmth that once filled these walls. Maria's fingers brushed over a splintered window frame as she passed, grounding her in the moment, and she allowed herself a brief breath. Her eyes roamed the room, taking in the remnants of a life long past. The cracked chalkboard still clung stubbornly to the wall, its surface marred by years of forgotten lessons and faded scribbles. Nearby, a stack of broken desks lay toppled, their surfaces scarred but echoing with the ghosts of children who had once sat and learned here. Each fragment seemed to tell a story, a whisper of laughter and discovery that had been silenced by time. Maria's gaze settled on a battered bookshelf nestled in the corner, its shelves sagging beneath a jumble of scattered papers and tattered books. She stepped closer, curiosity tugging at her despite the weariness that weighed on her. Fingers trembling slightly, she reached out and lifted a fragile volume, its cover faded and edges worn. Opening it carefully, she found pages filled with faded handwriting, notes, lesson plans, and what appeared to be a journal of sorts. The words were faint but legible, chronicling the days when the schoolhouse had been alive with activity. Maria's heart quickened as she read about teachers who had poured their hearts into nurturing young minds, about community gatherings that had sparked hope amidst hardship. The journal spoke of a place that had once been a sanctuary, a hub of learning and support for families struggling against the odds. A small smile tugged at the corners of Maria's lips, a fragile thread of connection weaving through the desolation. This building was more than just a shelter. It was a testament to resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there had been light. She traced the lines with her fingers, feeling a sudden kinship with the people who had cared for this place, who had believed in the power of community and kindness. With renewed determination, Maria began to explore further, moving carefully through the rooms. The creak of the floorboards beneath her feet echoed in the stillness, a steady rhythm that marked the passage of time. She found remnants of classrooms, faded posters clinging stubbornly to the walls, broken desks with carved initials, a lost pencil lying forgotten on the floor. Each discovery painted a picture of a vibrant past, a tapestry of lives intertwined within these walls. In one corner, Maria spotted a small alcove partially hidden by a fallen beam. She squeezed through the narrow space and found herself in a cramped room, its walls lined with peeling paint and faded photographs. The air was thick with dust, but a faint glow caught her eye. A lantern, its glass smudged but intact, resting atop a wooden crate. Nearby, a folded blanket lay neatly stacked, as if someone had left it there for a weary traveler. Her breath caught as she realized this hidden room had been used as a refuge, a secret place of warmth and safety amidst the larger building's decay. The lantern's faint glow flickered softly, casting dancing shadows that seemed to breathe life into the forgotten space. Maria's fingers closed around the blanket, pulling it close as a small sense of comfort blossomed within her. She sank down onto the wooden crate, the blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. In the quiet solitude, she opened a worn journal she had found in the bookshelf, its pages revealing stories of the schoolhouse's role as a sanctuary for vulnerable families, a place where kindness and hope had once been abundant. The entries spoke of volunteers who had dedicated their time and hearts to caring for those in need, offering shelter, support, and a sense of belonging. Maria's eyes traced the words, absorbing the legacy of compassion etched into the fabric of this place. The tales of resilience and solidarity stirred something deep within her, a flicker of hope that she had not felt in a long time. Here, in this forgotten room, the weight of her loneliness seemed to ease, replaced by a quiet determination to find strength in the stories of those who had come before. Outside, the world moved on, but within the schoolhouse's walls, time seemed to fold back on itself. Maria imagined the volunteers who had once walked these halls, the families who had found refuge here, their lives intertwined in a tapestry of struggle and survival. The legacy of care that permeated the building offered her a beacon, a reminder that even in the midst of hardship, hope could take root. As she settled into the corner, Maria allowed herself a moment to breathe deeply, to feel the warmth of the blanket against her skin and the steady rhythm of her child's movements within. The schoolhouse, once a place of learning and community, had become her sanctuary, a fragile but vital refuge from the cold and uncertainty that awaited beyond its walls. In this hidden room, surrounded by the echoes of the past, Maria found a connection that transcended time. The stories and remnants of the schoolhouse whispered promises of resilience and kindness, urging her to hold on to hope and to believe in the possibility of new beginnings. Though the path ahead was uncertain, Maria felt a quiet strength rising within her, a resolve to protect herself and her unborn child, to find a way through the darkness by drawing on the legacy of those who had cared for this place. The small lantern flickered gently, casting light into the shadows, and in that glow, Maria found a spark of courage to face whatever challenges awaited. As the day unfolded outside, the schoolhouse remained a world apart, a sanctuary filled with memories and quiet magic. Maria wrapped the blanket tighter, pressing her hands to her belly, and allowed herself to imagine a future where safety and warmth were not distant dreams, but living realities. Here, in the heart of this forgotten place, she began to gather the strength to face the uncertain road ahead. The soft glow of the lantern bathed the cramped room in a warm, flickering light, casting long shadows that danced across the peeling walls. Maria sat wrapped in the threadbare blanket, the weight of the journal resting gently in her lap. The pages, worn and yellowed with age, held secrets whispered by those who had once cared for this broken schoolhouse. And now, as she traced the faded ink with trembling fingers, she felt a connection to something larger than herself. The journal's entries told of a time when the schoolhouse was more than just a building. It was a beacon of hope for families battered by hardship. Volunteers had come from all corners of the city, offering their time, their warmth, and their compassion to those who had nowhere else to turn. The words painted vivid pictures of tireless hands preparing meals, quiet corners where children found solace, and the gentle smiles that had once filled the air with a fragile but unyielding kindness. Maria's breath caught as she read stories of resilience, families who had been broken by fate but mended within these walls, finding strength in shared struggles and the simple acts of care that had woven a safety net beneath them. One entry spoke of a woman who had transformed the schoolhouse into a sanctuary, tending to the sick and comforting the weary, her spirit a guiding light in the darkest nights. The dedication of those who had come before stirred something deep within Maria, a sense of belonging she had long forgotten. Outside the small room, the world remained harsh and unforgiving. But here, cradled by the echoes of generosity and hope, Maria felt a fragile sense of peace. The journal revealed that the schoolhouse had once been a refuge, not just from the cold, but from despair itself. It had been a place where broken souls found comfort, and where the simple act of kindness had been a revolutionary force against the tide of hardship. Tears welled in Maria's eyes as she closed the journal gently, the stories seeping into her bones. She felt the weight of her own journey, her fear, her loneliness, the uncertainty of the road ahead, but also a flicker of determination ignited by the legacy she had uncovered. This schoolhouse was more than a shelter. It was a testament to the enduring power of community and compassion. The lantern's glow softened as the flame flickered, casting a gentle warmth that seeped into the cold corners of the room. Maria drew the blanket tighter around her shoulders, feeling the steady flutter of life within her belly, a rhythm that mirrored the heartbeat of the place. The schoolhouse seemed to breathe with her, alive with the stories and spirits of those who had walked its halls before. As she sat in the quiet, Maria's mind raced with new resolve. She knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but the knowledge that she was not truly alone, connected by history and hope to a lineage of care, steadied her. The journal had become a lifeline, a source of strength that whispered promises of survival and renewal. Her fingers lingered on a folded piece of paper tucked within the pages, a list of names and addresses, perhaps of those who had once volunteered or sought shelter here. The thought that others had walked this path before filled her with cautious optimism. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to reach out, to find allies in the shadows of the city. The room around her was silent, save for the faint crackle of the lantern's flame and the rhythmic beating of her heart. Outside, the city stirred to life, indifferent to the small sanctuary nestled within its forgotten streets. But inside, Maria felt a warmth that transcended the physical, a growing sense of purpose that kindled hope where despair had once threatened to consume her. She rose slowly, the journal clutched close to her chest, and moved toward the doorway. The schoolhouse was no longer just a shelter from the cold. It was a repository of stories and strength, a place where she could gather the pieces of herself and prepare for the trials to come. Maria stepped back into the larger room, the beams of morning light filtering through broken windows, illuminating dust, motes that danced like tiny sparks of life. Her eyes scanned the space, taking in the faded remnants of classrooms and the silent testimony of resilience etched into every surface. The schoolhouse had been a cradle for hope, a refuge for those who had nowhere else to go. Now, it had become her refuge, a place where she could draw from the past to build a future. With newfound determination, Maria began to explore more thoroughly, moving with a purpose that belied her exhaustion. She combed through the scattered papers and forgotten artifacts, seeking anything that might aid her in the uncertain days ahead. Among the debris, she found a small stash of supplies, canned goods, a worn jacket, a bundle of clean towels, left behind by those who had cared for the schoolhouse. It was a modest gift, but to Maria, it was a lifeline. Her hands trembled as she gathered the items, a quiet surge of gratitude warming her chest. The generosity of strangers, preserved in this forgotten place, was a testament to the enduring kindness that still existed in the world. It was proof that, even in the darkest moments, compassion could be found, waiting to be reclaimed. As she arranged the supplies neatly in a corner, Maria felt a surge of resolve. The schoolhouse was more than shelter. It was a beacon of hope, a symbol of the unyielding spirit that had carried so many through hardship. And now, it was her turn to carry that legacy forward. She settled back into the hidden room, the bundle of blankets cocooning her against the chill. The lantern's flame flickered gently, casting soft shadows that seemed to dance in time with her thoughts. Maria closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of quiet reflection, the weight of fear lifting slightly in the presence of hope. The city beyond remained a daunting and uncertain place. But within the walls of the schoolhouse, Maria found a fragile sanctuary, a place where the past whispered promises of strength, and where the future, though unknown, held the possibility of new beginnings. With the journal's stories etched into her heart and the small cache of supplies at her side, she felt a tentative but growing courage. As the day wore on, Maria resolved to protect this newfound refuge, to honor the legacy of kindness that had carved a path through the darkness. The schoolhouse, once a forgotten building, had become a symbol of resilience, a place where she could find shelter for herself and the child she carried, and where hope might yet blossom amidst the ruins. In the quiet glow of the lantern, Maria pressed her hands to her belly, feeling the steady, life-affirming flutter within. The journey ahead was uncertain, but in this moment, wrapped in the warmth of history and gentle light, she found a flicker of peace, a promise that she would endure, and that from this fragile sanctuary, new life and hope could grow. The journal lay open on Maria's lap, its fragile pages revealing stories that wove a tapestry of resilience and hope within the walls of the schoolhouse. As she read further, the faded ink detailed more than just the history of a building. It told of a community bound by compassion, a network of volunteers and families who had found strength in solidarity. This was no mere shelter. It had been a sanctuary, a lifeline for those battered by life's storms. One entry caught Maria's breath. It described the schoolhouse's role as a refuge for vulnerable families, a place where kindness was the currency and hope the common thread. Volunteers had transformed the crumbling classrooms into spaces of care, offering meals, warm beds, and a listening ear. The journal spoke of late nights spent comforting frightened children, of shared stories that stitched broken hearts back together, and of a collective determination to rise above hardship. Maria's fingers trembled as she traced the words. The stories resonated deeply, echoing her own fears and aspirations. These pages held the voices of those who had refused to surrender to despair, who had chosen kindness in the face of neglect. The journal emphasized the importance of community, reminding its readers that no one was truly alone when surrounded by those who cared. A passage described the programs once run within these walls: classes teaching skills, workshops fostering creativity, gatherings that celebrated strength and resilience. The schoolhouse had been a beacon, a place where families learned to rebuild their lives and where children found safe spaces to dream. It was a vivid reminder that even in forgotten places, seeds of hope could be planted and nurtured. Maria closed her eyes, letting the stories wash over her. The weight of her own struggles pressed heavily, but alongside it bloomed a quiet inspiration. The legacy of care embedded in the schoolhouse walls was a call to action, a challenge to carry forward the spirit of those who had come before. She felt a stirring within, a determination to protect not just her unborn child, but the fragile community that this place represented. She rose slowly from her spot, the journal tucked under one arm, and moved through the larger room with renewed purpose. The sunlight filtered through the broken windows, illuminating faded posters and remnants of classrooms that had once buzzed with life. Maria imagined the volunteers who had labored tirelessly here, their hands offering gifts of warmth and security to those in need. Her footsteps stirred the dust as she approached a corner where a small collection of supplies lay forgotten: canned food, clean blankets, bottles of water. These remnants of past kindness were a tangible link to the schoolhouse's history as a refuge. Maria gathered them carefully, the weight of their significance settling in her chest. They represented more than just practical help. They were symbols of hope and solidarity. As she arranged the supplies neatly, Maria's thoughts turned to the challenges ahead. The city outside was harsh and unwelcoming, and the schoolhouse's shelter was fragile. Yet, the journal's stories reminded her that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, creating bonds strong enough to withstand adversity. The schoolhouse had been a haven because people had chosen to care. Her fingers brushed over a faded photograph pinned to the wall. A group of volunteers smiling, their faces marked by fatigue but shining with quiet pride. Maria studied their expressions, drawing strength from their courage. She realized that the legacy she had uncovered was not just history. It was a living promise. In this place, she could find allies, build connections, and perhaps one day offer the same sanctuary to others. Settling back into the hidden room, Maria wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The journal rested nearby, its stories a balm to her weary spirit. The fluttering life within her seemed to pulse in harmony with the heartbeat of the schoolhouse, a rhythm of endurance and hope. Though the path forward was uncertain, she felt less alone, buoyed by the knowledge that compassion had once flourished here. The silence around her was punctuated only by the faint creaks of the old buildings settling into the day. Outside, the city moved relentlessly. But inside the schoolhouse, time seemed to stretch and fold, holding space for healing and renewal. Maria closed her eyes, envisioning a future where this place could be reborn. A sanctuary not just of bricks and mortar, but of human kindness. Her resolve solidified. She would honor the legacy contained within these pages by fighting for safety and stability, not only for herself and her child, but for anyone who might one day seek refuge here. The journal's stories were a testament to the power of community, and Maria knew that even in the face of uncertainty, hope could be cultivated. As the afternoon light waned, Maria allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The schoolhouse was no longer just a shelter from the cold. It was a symbol of resilience, a beacon of hope forged in the hearts of those who had refused to give up. And now, that flame was passed to her. With the journal as her guide and the memories of kindness etched into the walls around her, Maria felt a stirring of courage. She pressed her hands to her belly, feeling the gentle movements within, and whispered a silent vow: to protect, to endure, and to carry forward the legacy of care that had sustained so many before her. In the quiet sanctuary of the schoolhouse, amidst the echoes of past kindness and the flickering light of the lantern, Maria found a fragile but unwavering hope, a promise that, even in the darkest times, compassion could light the way forward. The schoolhouse walls, worn and weathered, seemed to cradle Maria as she settled deeper into the small alcove she had claimed as her refuge. The faded journal lay open beside her, its stories of kindness and resilience still fresh in her mind. But now a new determination stirred within her, one that transformed hope into action. This place, once a sanctuary for so many, could be that again. For her unborn child, and for anyone else who might one day need it. Her fingers traced the edges of a folded bundle she had discovered tucked beneath a loose floorboard, a modest collection of supplies left behind by past caretakers. Inside, she found cans of food with faded labels, a worn jacket that still held warmth despite its age, a small pile of clean towels, and a few comforting items: a baby blanket, a bottle, and a small box of bandages. The sight of these offerings sparked a flicker of gratitude and renewed strength. The tangible kindness of strangers bridging the gap between past and present. Maria gathered the items carefully, her hands steady despite the tremor lingering in her chest. These were more than mere objects. They were lifelines, symbols of a community that had once thrived here, a testament to the enduring power of care. The supplies were imperfect, but to Maria, they represented a foundation on which she could begin to rebuild her fragile world. She arranged the items neatly in a corner of the room, creating a small sanctuary within the sanctuary, a place where she and her child might find comfort amid uncertainty. The act of organizing, of creating order from chaos, brought a quiet sense of control, a precious commodity in a life marked by unpredictability. As she worked, Maria's thoughts drifted to the stories she had read, the volunteers who had dedicated themselves to this place, the families who had found shelter and support within these walls. They had been ordinary people, transformed by compassion into guardians of hope. Their legacy was a beacon, guiding her through the shadows of her own struggle. The baby blanket, soft despite its age, stirred a wave of emotion that Maria fought to keep in check. She wrapped it gently around her growing belly, feeling the steady movements within, a reminder that life persisted even in the harshest conditions. The child she carried was both a responsibility and a source of strength, a reason to endure and to fight for something better. Outside, the wind whispered through the broken windows, carrying with it the distant sounds of the city waking, a world bustling and indifferent to the quiet drama unfolding within the schoolhouse's walls. But inside, Maria found a fragile peace, a pause from the relentless demands of survival. Here, she could breathe, gather strength, and plan. Her mind turned to the uncertain days ahead. Food and warmth were scarce, and the city's dangers lurked just beyond the fragile shelter. Yet, the presence of these supplies, left by unseen hands, was a reminder that she was not entirely alone. Somewhere, out there, kindness still existed, waiting to be reclaimed. Maria's resolve deepened. She would protect this place, nurture the fragile hope it held, and prepare for the challenges to come. The schoolhouse was more than a shelter. It was a symbol of resilience and solidarity, a place where broken lives could find fragments of healing. As twilight approached, casting long shadows across the worn floorboards, Maria gathered the blankets and supplies close, creating a cocoon of warmth against the encroaching cold. The soft glow of the lantern flickered, its light steady and reassuring. In the quiet, she allowed herself a moment to imagine a future where safety and care were not distant dreams, but realities she could grasp. The flickering flame seemed to echo the beating of her heart, steady and resolute despite the hardships. Maria closed her eyes, pressing her hands against her belly, feeling the gentle life within respond, a delicate dance of survival and hope. Though the path ahead was uncertain, the schoolhouse had become a sanctuary not only of shelter, but of spirit. It held the echoes of those who had chosen kindness in the face of adversity. And now, Maria carried their legacy forward, a torchbearer in a world that too often seemed cold and unyielding. In the silence, she whispered a vow to herself and to the child she carried, to protect this fragile haven, to nurture the flame of hope, and to find strength in the stories and gifts left behind. The journey would be hard, but within the walls of the schoolhouse, amidst the remnants of past kindness, Maria found the courage to face whatever lay ahead. The night deepened, wrapping the schoolhouse in darkness. But inside, a quiet light burned on, a testament to resilience, compassion, and the unbreakable will to survive. The morning sun had barely begun to warm the cracked pavement when Maria first heard the distant rumble of voices approaching the schoolhouse. At first, she thought it might be a group of passers-by or local children, but the harsh tone and clipped commands soon shattered that illusion. Through the broken windows, she saw figures assembling outside, city officials in crisp uniforms, their faces set with stern purpose, accompanied by workers carrying clipboards and equipment. Maria's heart hammered in her chest as she realized what was coming. The schoolhouse, her fragile sanctuary, was under threat. The officials' presence was unmistakable, a precursor to eviction or worse, demolition. The air outside was charged with authority and finality, a stark contrast to the warmth and hope she had begun to cultivate inside. She pressed herself against the cold wall, clutching the worn blanket tighter around her shoulders, her breath shallow but steady. The child inside her stirred, a subtle reminder of the stakes at hand. This place was no longer just shelter. It was a lifeline, a fragile thread connecting her to safety and survival. Voices outside grew louder, the officials announcing their intent to close the building on grounds of safety concerns and redevelopment plans. They spoke of inspections, health, hazards, and the city's vision for progress, a future that left no room for forgotten relics like the schoolhouse or the people who sought refuge within its walls. Maria's mind raced, desperation rising with each word. She knew the law was often cold and unyielding, indifferent to the lives caught in its path. But she also knew that surrender meant losing everything she had fought so hard to protect: the shelter, the supplies, the fragile hope she had nurtured in the shadows of this forgotten place. Summoning a courage born from months of hardship, Maria stepped cautiously toward the door, her voice barely above a whisper as she called out to the officials. The group fell silent, turning their attention to the lone figure emerging from the shadows. Her eyes, bright with fear and determination, met theirs with a quiet plea. "I live here," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'm pregnant. Please don't make me leave." The officials exchanged glances, some softening, others maintaining a strict demeanor. One woman, a middle-aged figure with kind eyes hidden behind glasses, stepped forward. She spoke gently but firmly, explaining the city's position and the legal mandate to close the building. Maria felt the weight of their bureaucratic language pressing down on her, a language designed to erase the human stories behind the bricks and mortar. Yet, beneath the formalities, she sensed a flicker of empathy in the woman's gaze. "I understand your situation," the woman said softly. "But the building is deemed unsafe. We have to follow protocol." Maria's hands clenched the blanket tighter. She knew she couldn't argue with officials armed with regulations and permits. But she also knew she couldn't abandon this place, not without a fight. The schoolhouse was more than shelter. It was her last refuge, the thin line between survival and despair. Drawing on the quiet strength that had carried her this far, Maria pleaded for more time to find alternative arrangements, time to gather resources, time to prepare for the birth of her child. Her voice wavered but held firm, a fragile beacon in the sea of cold bureaucracy. The woman hesitated, then nodded slowly. "We might be able to grant you a short extension," she said. "But you have to understand, this won't be permanent." Maria's heart leapt, relief mingling with the harsh reality of the limitation. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. A reprieve to hold on to hope a little longer. As the officials began their inspection, Maria slipped back inside, her mind racing with plans and fears. The schoolhouse, once a forgotten refuge, had become a battleground. A place where survival depended not just on shelter, but on resilience and resolve. She moved quickly to secure her small cache of supplies, covering the food and blankets with a worn cloth. Every item was precious, every moment a chance to prepare for the uncertain days ahead. The child inside her kicked gently, a steady rhythm that anchored her amidst the turmoil. Outside, the workers measured and examined, their footsteps heavy on the cracked floor. Maria watched from a hidden corner, her breath shallow but steady, her eyes sharp and alert. The threat of eviction loomed, but within her burned a fierce determination to protect her sanctuary and the fragile hope it represented. As the day wore on, Maria reached out quietly for help wherever she could, calling a distant friend, sending messages to local shelters, gathering information about resources. The city was vast and often indifferent, but within its shadows, she sought allies, fragments of kindness to bolster her fragile defenses. The schoolhouse, battered and aging, stood at the center of her struggle, a testament to endurance and the unyielding will to survive. Maria knew the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but she also knew that surrender was not an option. That night, as the city settled into uneasy silence, Maria lay curled beneath the blankets, her hand resting on her swollen belly. The schoolhouse held its breath with her, a fragile sanctuary flickering against the storm of change. And in the quiet, she whispered a vow, not just to survive, but to fight for the hope that had found root out within these crumbling walls. The wind rose sharply that evening, rattling the broken windows of the schoolhouse as twilight slipped into night. Outside, the city's distant hum grew quieter, swallowed beneath the growing storm that darkened the sky and whipped through the empty streets. Within the fragile walls of her refuge, Maria moved with purpose, her breath steady despite the chill that crept into her bones. She had spent the day preparing, her thoughts consumed by the uncertain hours ahead. The official's warning still echoed in her mind. The looming deadline to vacate the building pressed heavily on her, but she refused to let despair take root. Instead, she focused on the small tasks she could control, organizing her meager supplies and bolstering the sanctuary she had carved out amidst the decay. The soft rustle of blankets accompanied her movements as she folded and stacked them near the makeshift bed in the corner. Each layer was a shield against the cold that threatened to seep through the cracked walls. She arranged the small stash of food and water within reach, mindful of conserving what little she had for the days to come. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she checked the supply of clean towels and the baby blanket she had found. A fragile promise of warmth for the unknown hours she might soon face. The weight of her growing belly was a constant reminder of the life she carried. A steady rhythm beneath her fingertips that grounded her amidst the storm's fury. Outside, the first gusts of the tempest swept through the battered structure, sending loose debris skittering across the floorboards. The wind's howl was a haunting accompaniment to the storm raging within her, a mixture of fear, hope, and fierce determination. She pressed her palms to her belly, feeling the subtle flutter of her child's movements, a fragile but unwavering heartbeat that echoed her own. The small alcove where she sheltered felt suddenly vulnerable, the thin walls offering scant protection against the storm's wrath. Yet within that precarious space, Maria found a quiet strength, a reservoir of resilience forged by months of hardship and solitude. She refused to yield to the cold or the uncertainty. She would face whatever came with a steadfast heart. As night deepened, the storm intensified, rain pelting the broken windows in relentless sheets and thunder rolling like distant drums. Mariah wrapped the blankets tighter around her shoulders, the warmth of fleeting comfort against the chill that crept into her bones. She whispered soft words to the child within, a lullaby born of hope and courage. Her breathing slowed, matching the rhythmic pulse of life inside her. The storm outside was fierce and unyielding, but within the schoolhouse's fragile walls, a fragile sanctuary held fast. Maria closed her eyes, drawing on the strength that had carried her this far, steeling herself for the coming hours. Suddenly, a sharp pain seized her abdomen, a fierce contraction that stole her breath and sent a wave of panic rushing through her. She gasped, clutching the edge of the worn desk nearby for support. The storm's fury outside seemed to mirror the tempest within, each surge a reminder of the approaching moment she had both feared and awaited. Maria's heart pounded as another contraction followed swiftly, the pain intensifying and her breath coming in shallow gasps. She knew she was going into labor, alone, in the shelter of this forgotten schoolhouse, with only the flickering lantern light and the storm as witnesses. Fear threatened to overwhelm her, but beneath it, a wellspring of determination rose. She steadied herself against the trembling walls, her hands trembling but resolute. The child she carried was a beacon in the darkness, a life that demanded courage and strength. In the dim light, a soft knock echoed at the door, a sound so unexpected amid the storm and silence that Maria's breath caught. She hesitated, fear and hope warring within her, before cautiously moving to open it. Standing there was a woman, soaked from the rain, her eyes kind and steady. She introduced herself as Margaret, a midwife who had heard of the schoolhouse's plight and had come to check on those inside. Her presence was a balm to Maria's frayed nerves, a sudden promise of help and humanity in the cold night. Margaret moved quickly but gently, setting down a small bag of supplies and guiding Maria through the labor with calm reassurance. Her hands were steady, her voice soothing, offering instructions and comfort as the storm raged outside. Together, they transformed the dilapidated schoolhouse into a place of birth and hope. Hours passed in a blur of pain and perseverance, the thunder outside mingling with Maria's cries and whispered prayers. Margaret's presence was a lifeline, her experience a shield against the fear that threatened to consume Maria. Finally, as dawn's first light began to seep through the cracked windows, a newborn's cry pierced the stillness. A fragile, powerful sound that shattered the night's darkness. Maria, exhausted but filled with awe, held her child close, tears streaming down her cheeks as relief and love washed over her. The storm had not broken her. It had borne witness to new life and resilience. In the quiet aftermath, Maria felt a profound connection to the legacy of the schoolhouse, a place that had once sheltered others in need and now cradled her and her child in its fragile embrace. Wrapped in the soft blanket, her newborn nestled against her chest, Maria looked around the battered room with renewed purpose. The journey ahead would be difficult, but this moment, a beginning forged in hardship and hope, was a testament to survival and the enduring power of compassion. Outside, the storm's fury had waned, leaving the city washed clean and ready for whatever the new day might bring. Inside the schoolhouse, a mother and child rested, bound together by love and the quiet strength that had carried them through the darkest hours. The dawn light seeped softly through the fractured windows of the schoolhouse, casting pale beams over the worn floorboards where Maria sat cradling her newborn daughter. Her arms trembled with exhaustion, but her eyes shone with a fierce, unyielding love. The tiny bundle nestled against her chest, wrapped in the faded blanket she had treasured for weeks, let out a soft, contented sigh, a fragile sound that filled the room with a quiet hope. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean, but forever changed, much like Maria herself. The night had tested her strength in ways she had never imagined. But with Margaret's steady presence and gentle guidance, she had brought new life into the world. Life that now depended wholly on her. Margaret sat nearby, her expression a mix of relief and quiet pride. She had arrived as an unexpected beacon of support, a reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, compassion could find its way. She tended to Maria's needs with practiced hands, offering words of encouragement and practical advice. Her calm demeanor, a steady anchor amidst the emotional tempest. Maria's thoughts swirled as she gazed down at her daughter, the reality of motherhood settling over her like a fragile mantle. The journey ahead was daunting. Uncertainty loomed large, and the city outside offered little comfort or safety. Yet, in this moment, wrapped in the fragile sanctuary of the schoolhouse, she found a wellspring of strength she hadn't known she possessed. The birth was more than a physical event. It was a testament to resilience, a defiant act of hope against the backdrop of hardship and isolation. For Maria, it symbolized a new beginning, not just for her child, but for herself. The schoolhouse, once a forgotten relic, had become a cradle of life and possibility. As the morning light grew stronger, Maria and Margaret began to prepare for the challenges that lay ahead. Supplies were scarce, and the threat of eviction still hung heavily in the air. Yet they moved with quiet determination, organizing what little they had and discussing plans to seek out aid from local shelters and community groups. Margaret's presence was a beacon of hope, her knowledge and kindness a lifeline that Maria clung to tightly. She spoke softly about resources, about ways to navigate the city's complex web of support, and about the importance of community in the face of adversity. Maria listened intently, absorbing every word, her resolve hardening with each passing moment. Outside the schoolhouse, the city stirred to life, indifferent to the quiet miracle that had unfolded within its crumbling walls. The streets were already filling with the noise of daily routines, cars honking, footsteps echoing, voices calling out. But inside, time seemed to slow, holding space for this new chapter. Maria's thoughts drifted to the future, the uncertain days and nights, the struggle to find stability and safety for her daughter. Fear lingered, but it was tempered by a cautious hope. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew she was not alone. The legacy of the schoolhouse, the kindness of strangers like Margaret, and the fierce love for her child would guide her forward. As the sun climbed higher, Maria reached out to touch the small bundle of blankets beside her, the meager supplies she had gathered over weeks of hardship. Food, water, clothing, and a few precious items for the baby formed a fragile lifeline. She wrapped the blankets carefully, ensuring her daughter was warm and protected against the chill that still lingered in the air. Margaret helped her prepare a simple meal, their movements synchronized in quiet cooperation. The act of sharing food, of tending to basic needs, became a small but vital ritual, a reminder that survival was built on these small moments of care and connection. Throughout the day, Maria received messages of support from a few distant friends and local advocates who had heard of her plight. Though the city was vast and often indifferent, pockets of kindness and solidarity emerged, offering a glimmer of hope in the shadows. As evening approached, Maria sat by the window, cradling her daughter and watching the city lights flicker to life. The schoolhouse, battered but standing, was a symbol of endurance, a place where life had taken root against all odds. She whispered her daughter's name softly, a vow carried on the wind, to protect, to nurture, and to fight for a future where hope could flourish. The birth had marked a beginning, but it was only the first step in a journey defined by resilience and love. In the quiet sanctuary of the schoolhouse, Maria felt the weight of her new role settle over her, not as a burden, but as a purpose. The challenges ahead were daunting, but with each breath, she embraced the strength within, ready to face whatever the world might bring. The night deepened, wrapping the city in shadows once more. But within the walls of the schoolhouse, a mother and child rested, bound together by a fierce, unbreakable bond. Their story was just beginning. Days had passed since Maria's daughter, a fragile spark of new life, had entered the world within the battered walls of the schoolhouse. The city's relentless pace continued outside, but within this fragile sanctuary, a quiet transformation was unfolding, one marked by resilience, hope, and the slow weaving of community. Maria sat by the cracked window, the soft light of early autumn filtering through the broken panes and casting a golden glow over the worn floorboards. Her newborn daughter rested peacefully in her arms, wrapped snugly in the faded blanket that had become a symbol of survival and love. The child's steady breathing was a soothing rhythm, a heartbeat that tethered Maria to a future she was determined to build. The challenges of recent weeks pressed heavily on her. Scarce resources, the looming threat of eviction, and the constant uncertainty of their precarious existence. Yet, amidst the hardship, a quiet strength had taken root, nourished by the small victories and the kindness that had found its way into their lives. A gentle knock at the door stirred Maria from her reverie. She rose carefully, cradling her daughter close, and opened it to find a handful of neighbors and volunteers gathered outside. Their faces were weathered but warm, carrying baskets of food, blankets, and supplies. They had heard of Maria's plight and the birth that had taken place within the schoolhouse, and they had come to offer support. Gratitude welled within Maria's chest as she welcomed them inside, their presence a tangible reminder that she was no longer alone. The schoolhouse's faded walls seemed to brighten with the influx of care, the air filling with quiet conversations, laughter, and the soft coos of the newborn. Among the visitors was a local lawyer who had volunteered to assist with legal matters concerning the property. She explained that efforts were underway to challenge the city's decision to close the schoolhouse, emphasizing the importance of preserving it as a sanctuary for those in need. The news kindled a spark of hope within Maria, an affirmation that the fragile refuge she had fought to protect might yet endure. As the afternoon unfolded, plans were made to transform the building from a forgotten relic into a community shelter once more. Volunteers spoke of organizing classes, support groups, and resources to aid homeless families and individuals facing hardship. The schoolhouse's legacy of compassion and care was poised to be rekindled, its walls set to embrace new stories of survival and solidarity. Maria found herself at the heart of this emerging community, her journey embodying the resilience and hope that had always been the schoolhouse's true foundation. She began to document her experiences in a journal, capturing the trials, triumphs, and quiet moments that had shaped her path. Each entry was a testament to the strength found in vulnerability and the power of connection. In the evenings, neighbors gathered around a makeshift fire pit outside, sharing stories and songs under the vast autumn sky. Maria listened, her daughter nestled against her, feeling a profound sense of belonging that had once seemed impossible. The schoolhouse, alive once more with laughter and purpose, had become a sanctuary not just of shelter, but of spirit. The challenges ahead remained daunting, but Maria faced them with a renewed sense of purpose. She understood now that survival was not merely about enduring hardship, but about nurturing hope, building community, and embracing the strength found in shared humanity. As the days grew shorter and the leaves turned fiery shades of red and gold, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the cold city streets to the warmth of the schoolhouse and the birth of her daughter, the path had been fraught with fear and uncertainty, but it had also been illuminated by acts of kindness and the unbreakable will to endure. With pen in hand, Maria wrote the final words in her journal for the day, a dedication to her daughter and to the countless souls who had walked this path before her. The schoolhouse, once silent and forgotten, now pulsed with life, history, and promise. As night settled over the city, Maria gazed out the window, the cool autumn breeze carrying the scent of change and renewal. The schoolhouse stood resilient against the dark, a beacon of hope and strength. Within its walls, a new chapter had begun, one where love, courage, and community would guide the way forward. Cradling her daughter close, Maria whispered a vow into the quiet night. To protect this sanctuary, to nurture the legacy of compassion, and to pass down the wisdom and strength she had inherited. The journey was far from over, but in this moment, surrounded by the echoes of the past and the promise of the future, she felt a profound peace. The schoolhouse, alive with history and heart, welcomed its newest keeper. Together, Maria and her daughter faced the dawn of a new chapter, one filled with hope, resilience, and the enduring power of belonging.